Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to part 17 for our Godot Action RPG series. In this video, we're going to be implementing some basic player stats, and we're going to be adding a hurtbox to our enemies. And there's a problem that comes up with that, so we're going to be addressing that problem as well and adding some extra functionality to our enemies. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is create our player stats. And I'm going to be using an autoload singleton for this. So there are better ways to do this, actually. This isn't a terrible way to do it. And so as a beginner, it's a pretty easy way to pick up and start using. But as you learn more and more about Godot, I would recommend looking into some alternative methods for handling your player's stats. So that's just a little disclaimer. Let's start by creating a new scene right here. And actually what we're going to do is come up to scene and do new inherited scene. Now what this will allow us to do is create a scene that inherits everything from a different scene. And we're going to do that from our stats scene here. So now we have the same script and the same properties here set up in the editor. So we're going to rename this though, player stats. And if we create an inherited scene like this, what it allows us to do, we'll save this inside of player here. What it allows us to do is have our stats script attached here. So whenever we update our stats, we can update information about the player's stats as well. So we'll start by closing, we'll want to set our player's health. And I guess 4 is actually a pretty good starting point for the health. So we'll just close out of this, and then we'll go to project settings, and go to auto load. And right here we can select our player stats. And this creates a global singleton that can be accessed anywhere in code. And that's why I say there are better ways to do this, and you could look into some of those better ways as you learn more and more about Godot. But once again, this isn't a terrible way to do it. So let's save right here, and we'll come back to our player scene. And we want to give our player access to those stats. And so we'll come in here and we'll say, let's just do, we don't have to do, since it's a global, you can actually just access it anywhere, like player stats, like this. But if you're just accessing your singletons everywhere, I think that's a little bit not a great way to do it. I think it's a little better to create your own little stats variable and get access this way. So that way you know the player is accessing this global autoload singleton. Then we can come into our ready function here, and we can connect the signal that is in our stats. So we can say stats.connect, and we want to connect to no health, and we'll connect to ourself. And for now, we'll just do Q free. And we need this to be in quotes, actually. There we go. Okay, so remember how this works. We get the object that has the signal we're connecting to, the object that has the function, and the function that we're connecting to. And we're just connecting to our own queue-free function right here. And now we need to attach a hurtbox to our player. So let's instance a new hurtbox. And this hurtbox, we're going to need to do editable children, and we're going to need to give it a collision shape. I'm going to do a capsule shape, and we'll shrink this down a bit like this. I'm going to hold Alt so I can select it and move this up. And this will be our player's hurtbox. So we're going to be pretty generous on getting hit for this player. Kind of right here, just on the body, the head and ears and cape and stuff. We won't count that. Then we click on our hurtbox again, and we come over here to our collision, and we want to put it on a specific layer, and we want to put it on the player hurtbox layer, and save. Okay, so we've created the player's hurtbox, but now we need to connect to the area entered signal so that we can actually do something when our player gets hurt. So let's connect this signal to our player. And inside of here, we'll say stats.health minus equals 1. And we'll save and run the game. We should, oh yeah, but our enemies don't have a hurtbox attached to them still. So let's do that. Let's open up our bat. Come into our bat here, our bat scene. We'll come into 2D. We'll instance a new hitbox on our bats. Overlap hitbox. We'll do editable children. Give it a collision shape here. Just gonna do, oops, I actually want a circle. Let's clear this. Do a little teeny circle. And I'm gonna hold Alt once again so I can select the one that we're doing and drag this up and stick it right on our bat right here. Really small collision shape. Again, trying for the hitbox. Trying to be generous here towards the player. Although I did accidentally not center it. Make it centered. There we go. Okay, and we'll come into our collision and we want to set the mask for this. This is what layer the collision is looking to, right? And we want to look to the player hurtbox right here, and we'll save. Now this should work now. And you can see the bat, it hits us 4 times and we die. So that is working properly. However, there is a problem with this. And it's a little hard to see unless you come over into like a corner or something. But if I come into a corner, so the bat hurtbox enters the player, right? And damages us, but then it never actually leaves. And so then the hurtbox, the signal that we're using, the area entered signal, doesn't fire again because that signal only fires when the area gets entered, not when there's an area inside of it. And obviously that's a little bit of an optimization thing so that we don't have to fire that signal every single collision, every single frame a collision is occurring. It only happens when the hurtbox enters us. So what's the solution to that? I don't know what the best solution to that is actually. So what I decided to go with was adding some modifications to our hurtbox scene here. And one of the benefits of having this reusable hurtbox scene is that now if we make changes to this, it will be on all hurtboxes that we've instanced, right? So we can come into our hurtbox scene here and we're going to add some new functionality to it. And this functionality is going to be an invincibility. So our hurtboxes will be able to have an invincibility property that we can set, okay? The other thing that we actually want to change is instead of doing this, I decided I didn't like this method right here. Remember how we had this show hit and then we created the hitbox? I have a different way I want to do this now. So we're going to actually get rid of this export variable. Get rid of this. Select all this plus Shift Tab. And then we'll change this right here, this function, to create hit effect. Like this. And now we need to disconnect that signal. We can come back into Node, click on this, and do disconnect. Like that. Okay? So don't forget to disconnect the signal. Okay. This way, we can just call this function whenever we want to actually create a hit effect. And that's actually better for us anyways. So then we're going to create our variable here for our invincibility. So we'll say var invincible equals false. Now this is going to have a setter. So we'll do setGet, set invincible. Okay, and we'll create our function set invincible value. So we'll set it to something either true or false. invincible equals value, and then we'll say if. So then we want to be able to signal out, signal up to our player or enemy whenever the invincibility starts and when the invincibility ends. So we're going to create these signals. Invincibility started, and then signal invincibility. Man, that's a hard word to type. Ended. Hopefully I spelled it right. Invincibility started, invincibility ended, and then we can say if invincible equals true, emit signal, invincibility started, else, emit signal, invincibility ended. Okay, so now we can emit a signal based on whether our invincibility has started or ended. And we want to attach this to some sort of a duration, like a time, right? An amount of time. So we're going to create, on our hurtbox, we're going to create a timer. And this timer is going to have a timeout that connects to the hurtbox. And so when this timer goes off, we're just going to say self.invincible equals false. Okay. Now we have to call self here because the setter will only get activated if you call self here. So inside, and the reason that that's set up that way, at least I assume, is so that when you set it in here, it doesn't create recursion and call the setter every single time that you set invincible. So you can, inside of an object like this or inside of a node, you can choose whether or not you want it to call the setter based on whether or not you put self before it. So here it's not going to, here it is going to call the setter. Okay? And that way we know that these signals are being emitted. So we're going to create a function here for setting our, not for setting, but for starting our invincibility. So we'll create a function called start invincibility. I think, okay. And we'll give it a duration. And we'll just say, we'll get access to our timer up here. OnReady var timer equals timer. And we'll just say timer.start duration. And we'll set our invincibility. So self.invincible equals true. So let's talk over this logic here real quick. So we set our we start our invincibility with this function. It sets invincible to true, which then starts our timer at this duration. And then once the timer's done, it sets our invincibility back to false. And admittedly, now that I think about it, we don't actually need a setter and a getter because this is all happening inside of the hurtbox. So we could actually just do that here. Put this inside of our invincibility, start invincibility function, and then this inside of our end timer here. You could do that too. This allows you to set the invincibility in other places and have it still trigger these signals, which you may want. So, either way works. But we'll just leave it this way for now. So whenever we set the invincibility, whenever we start the invincibility, it starts a timer, and then after that timer is done, we set it back to false. And we're signaling out to other areas when these things happen. So now this gives our character an invincibility, but it doesn't, which solves the problem of the player getting damaged really quickly over a short amount of time if the enemy comes in and out really quickly. However, it doesn't actually solve the problem that we have with the the overlap where the on entered. Remember how we're using on entered? So the solution that I came up for that was a little property inside of our area 2D called monitoring and monitorable. So since this is a hurtbox, we're going to be using monitorable. So we're going to, these basically correspond with layer and mask. So if monitoring is on, it will check the mask. If monitorable is on, it will check the layer. So since we're putting these hurtboxes on a layer, we're going to access monitorable. At least that's my understanding of how they work. But if we turn off monitorable and then turn it back on, that will actually re-trigger the area entered or on our hitbox. So it will re-trigger it because it's like we're coming back, we're turning off for a second, and then we enter it again. And so we're able to use that with our invincibility here. So come into your hurtbox, and we're going to use these signals that we created. So invincibility started, we'll connect that to our hurtbox, and then we'll also connect invincibility ended to the hurtbox like this. And we can set that property. So we'll just say monitorable equals false, and we'll come into here and say monitorable equals true. So when our invincibility starts, it turns off us being able to be monitored. And then once our invincibility ends, then it turns it back on, so then we can be monitored. So we're basically deactivating our hurtbox while we're invincible and then reactivating it. However, there's a problem with this, and I want to show you what it is. So let's come over here. We'll come over to, well, this is fine. And you can see that it's not working. In fact, save here. That was not what I was expecting. So let's come into here, get hit. And oh, of course, silly me. So we actually need to call start invincibility here. So come into our player. And we can say on area entered right here, we need to get access to our player's hurtbox. So come up here, say on ready var hurtbox equals hurtbox. There we go. And then when we get damaged right here on hurtbox entered, we can say hurtbox dot start invincibility, and we'll do 0.5, so half a second of invincibility, and we'll do hurtbox dot create hit effect. So we'll do both those things. We'll create a hit effect and we'll start our invincibility. We need to do that in our bat as well. So on hurtbox entered right here, we need to get access to the hurtbox up here. So on ready var hurtbox equals hurtbox. The reason I create this variable up here instead of just using this all the time is in case you end up changing the name right here, you don't have to change it everywhere in your code. You can just change it once up here. So then we can say hurtbox dot create hit effect. And our bats don't need an invincibility, although we will probably end up giving them a short invincibility. So now when we come up here, you can see we get damaged, but now we're getting we get damaged once and then it never works again, which is what it was doing before. And we get this error message, okay? And it says set monitorable, function blocked during in-out signal, use set deferred. So what this means, basically, my understanding here, is that this signal right here, where we're setting our invincibility, is actually being fired during the physics process. And during the physics process, you're not allowed to change monitorable. It's blocked, basically. See, it says it's blocked during in-out signal. That means during this time, it's because, you know, if you were to set that in the middle of a physics process, it could mess up the calculations and ruin the processing. And so you're not allowed to set it then. So it wants us to use set deferred. Now set deferred is just a function that will allow us to set a variable, but have it do it at the end of the game loop, basically. So it'll kind of wait till the end, wait till everything's been processed, and then set it later. And that's actually what we want here. So inside of our invincibility started, we'll say set deferred, and then you get to tell it which property, which is monitorable. And then you get to tell it what to set it to, which is false. We want to set it to false. And then we can just save right here. And this signal right here should be fine because this is actually on our timer, right? The invincibility ending happens on our timer. So we should be fine just leaving that one there. We'll see if that actually works. But we can come over here. We get hit, 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 hit again. We don't get any error messages. And our player has a certain amount of invincibility attached to them now. So, and it works. And obviously setting monitorable the way that we did works for the edge case where we're in the corner and the enemy's hurtbox never leaves. We're still getting damage now. So let's turn off visible collision shapes. It's getting a little crazy with the different collision shapes we have set up. And now we should be able to attack these bats, be damaged by them, and actually be killed by the bats too. And there we go. And that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you have any comments or suggestions, be sure to leave them down in the description below or in the comments below. This video was made possible by the 1-Bit Godot Kickstarter backers. I'll put a link to that at the end of this video so you can check it out if you're interested. And subscribe to my channel, and I will be making the next part probably, I think, next Monday. So I will see you all then. Enjoy your weekend.